Hello guys, this is Joe Neville, and in this video I'm going to show you how to access an Aruba 2920 switch using Public Key Authentication. Now, a quick warning before you make any changes to your security configuration on your network. Make sure that you understand the network security policy and that you're not breaching this. Any kind of change to your security configuration could end up with you locking yourself out or other people, and I will not be held responsible if you lose your Employee of the Month award. With the warning out of the way, what is Public Key Authentication? Well, it's based on a cryptographic system that uses a pair of keys. You have a private key that is known only to the holder and a public key which is freely distributed. This allows encryption with the public key that only the private key holder can decrypt. There's many uses for this, but what we're using it for is to authenticate the private key holder. As you can imagine, it's pretty complex stuff, but I've tried to dumb it down somewhat so it's easily digestible. What we do in essence is that we create a key pair, the public and the private. We transfer the public key over to the 2920 switch. Then we use the private key to SSH into the 2920 without using a password. With the SSH, there's a bit more going on. What we actually do is that the SSH client sends the public key to the switch, which will check against its stored public keys. It will verify the key, then create a random string and encrypt it using that key, send it back to the client. The client will decrypt this and combine it with some SSH session specific information, return that hash, and if all's good, the 2920 will allow us to authenticate. Okay, here's the how-to steps. First of all, I suggest that you configure a local username and password just as a safety net if something goes wrong in your configuration. Then we configure the 2920 with this AAA command, which allows us to enable public key authentication via SSH. We then generate a key pair using PubKeyAuth or another key generation application. We transfer the public key to the 2920 from our workstation to the device. I'm going to do that via a USB. You can do it via TFTP. Then we need to run on the switch this command to copy the public key. So once the key's actually on the switch, what we need to do is add it to our SSH agent. I'm going to be using the PuTTY suite, so that's called Pageant. And then I'm going to build a new PuTTY SSH session which does not use a password to authenticate. Here on the left I have a console session into my 2920. Always good to have a console session when you're making changes to a security configuration so that you don't lock yourself out. Here's a show version. I'm running 16.02.12, so a relatively new version of code. Here's the configuration. I've already put a password on for the manager and the operator, so I've completed step 1. Now I need to put on that AAA authentication command. Okay, done. Now to generate the key pair. As mentioned, I'm using PuTTY and its related applications. If you don't have that installed, just do a search on PuTTY in Google. You hit this download page, it's the top hit, and you want the suite rather than just PuTTY itself. If you're running Windows, there's this installer here which you can use. I've already got it installed, so I just open up PubKeyAuth, and we are going to generate the public and private key pair by hitting this button. There's various parameters down here. I'm just sticking with the default. So I need to move my cursor over this box to generate some randomness. Now the key's generated, I'll save the public key. I've already created a folder for my keys. Give it a name, JPub1, save that. I also am going to transfer this via USB, so I'll do that transfer onto the USB now. You can TFTP this onto the switch if you wish. Also, I'm going to use a passphrase. Now, one of the things that I mentioned was that if you hold the private key, you will be able to authenticate without using a password. So you could think, that's going to be a security risk, isn't it? So what you can do is add a passphrase to the private key, basically to unlock it. But the good thing here is that you only need to unlock it once, and then all subsequent SSH sessions will authenticate without the requirement of you re-entering the passphrase. Let's enter the passphrase now then. I save my private key. So that's saved locally. Next on the list is to transfer the public key to the 2920. As mentioned, I'm doing that via the USB. That's now physically installed. dir, there we are, jpub1, and there's this copy command specifically to allow us to import public key files. And the default is to be authenticated at the operator level. Now I want to skip that step and go straight in at the manager access level, so I enter that now. And I would like to associate this key with a specific user, so I put the username in. If that fails, there'll be an error message there, but that's successful, so we can actually have a look at that public key on the device. With the show crypto client public key command. There we are, we've got, it's a manager key, username Joe, and that's the key string there that we'll be using. Now on to step 6, we need to add the key to our SSH agent Pageant. Pageant's part of the PuTTY suite, so I open that up. Like so. And we see down at the bottom right we have this workstation with a hat on. Right click that, add key. So this is my private key which I wish to add. And this is where I need to add the passphrase to unlock the key. Then we can see that the key's imported into Pageant. We can close this window off and it will still run. And from here directly we can build a PuTTY session. That IP address is of the out-of-band management port. It's a DHCP assigned address that is on the 2920 on my home wireless network. I'll save that as the 2920 new connection. Open it up and hopefully it should authenticate. There we go. And I'm in straight at the, as you can see from the hash, at the manager level. Excellent, so that worked. Now while we have Pageant running, that means I can log in via SSH to this switch without having to re-enter my passphrase. I'll just show you that, a duplicate session. We're straight in at the manager level. Now what happens if I try to log in as a different user but using that private key? I'll change Joe to Bob. So there you can see that it's asking for a password from Bob, so he would need to have a password set up to actually be able to access this device. Okay, that was public key authentication to an Aruba 2920. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please like, comment and subscribe. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching. My name's Joe Neville and goodbye.